There's an insane amount of health issues that can come about as a direct result of your bile becoming too thick and sticky to flow correctly. Things like loose stools and acne and gallstones and nausea and weight gain and high blood pressure and a whole lot more. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 5 steps you can take to help thin your bile so it can flow better. Let's jump in.
TC Hill is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
To review the most important aspects of proper bile flow, I like to remind people that when the liver filters toxins and junk out of the body, it puts that junk into our bile so that it can be sent out the back door with our stool. This is how the body takes out the trash. This is the most effective way to get the junk out. So if bile isn't flowing correctly, a lot of those toxins can accumulate and lead to issues like acne and other skin issues and nausea and high blood pressure. Once the liver puts this junk into the bile goes down to the gallbladder where it's stored and concentrated. Now, once we properly acidify our food in the stomach, that acidic product leaves the stomach, and that's when the gallbladder squirts this bile down onto the acidic product to help neutralize those acids and really break the food down. If the acids aren't neutralized when they leave the stomach, they can continue going through the intestinal tract in a big hurry so that they don't damage the intestinal tract. The body can rush it through the system, and that can create chronic diarrhea issues or can make it very difficult for us to assimilate any of the nutrients in the food we're eating. But the real benefit that comes from this alkaline bile meeting the acid product that leaves the stomach is that this action creates a sizzle. This sizzle helps us really break the food apart so that we can access all the nutrients in that food. Without that sizzle, you can't access everything in the food that you're eating. So you really need the acid side of digestion working as well as the alkaline bile side working to get that sizzle action to really digest your food correctly. Without that, you end up with nutrient and mineral and vitamin deficiencies, which can lead to just about any type of health issue. Beyond all these benefits, bile is also what we use to emulsify or break down our dietary fats. If we can't properly break down these fats, we can't access fat-soluble vitamins, and also these undigested fats can turn toxic and lead to being a burden that the body has to figure out how to get rid of. This can lead to weight gain or acne or other skin issues or nausea and a whole lot of other problems. So you can see how important it is to make sure that bile is thin enough to flow correctly so it can do all the job it's intended to do. The problem is there's a lot of things in this world that we live in now that can thicken up the bile and make it so that it doesn't flow correctly, and this problem is very common. Things like grains are very problematic for some people. Processed foods, you know anybody that eats any processed foods? It's everywhere, it's all over the place, you can't hide from it. So these two things can be a really big problem. Another issue could be a low-fat diet. You know, those are very popular in the 80s, and a lot of people are still stuck into thinking, oh, a low-fat diet is the healthiest thing to do. And when we don't eat enough fats, we're not calling on the bile to come down and help emulsify those fats. So the bile can sit there and it gets a little more thick as it concentrates more in the gallbladder, and then it becomes too thick and sticky to move correctly. So this can be a big problem. Another issue can be high estrogen levels. And there's a lot of medications like some birth controls and other medications that can really raise estrogen levels, and it really appears that estrogen, when it's high, has the ability to thicken the bile so it won't flow correctly. Another problem is a catabolic imbalance that some people deal with at the cellular level. And we teach people in our free 4-week digestion course how to look at their own physiology and just do simple self-tests that they can do at home with tools you can pick up at a pharmacy or a health food store. And we teach people how to figure out if they may be dealing with one of these catabolic imbalances and then steps they can take to improve it. But you can see there's a wide variety of issues that can make this a big problem for a lot of people. We're going to cover those 5 steps that you can take to thin your bile, but first let's look at some markers that may indicate that maybe you're having a problem and that you might need to take some steps to thin that bile a little bit. Now, keep in mind that most people are not going to experience all of these markers. You might be dealing with only one of these markers, but that could still be enough to indicate that it might be a problem and that you could take some steps to improve the issue. The first marker we want to look at is a light colored stool, like if your stool is lighter than the color of corrugated cardboard. Bile is often what helps us make our stool a dark brown color. So when there's not enough bile flowing, we'll often see the stool a lighter color, or the color will vary and kind of go back and forth. So if that's an issue for you, that's a really strong indication that bile is not flowing well. Another issue with your stool is because it could be loose stools. Now, when bile is not there to neutralize the acids leaving the stomach, those acids are too hot for the intestinal tract. The stomach is meant to hold those acids, but the intestinal tract is not. So if those acids are not neutralized by bile coming down and neutralizing them, then the body will bring all the water that it can to the intestinal tract to cool off these acids, and then it'll rush it out the back door and it lifts us off the toilet like a rocket when it comes shooting out. So that's not a great situation. And plus, when the stool is moving that fast, it makes it very difficult for us to assimilate the nutrients in the food we're eating. That's not great. The next marker is nausea. Now remember that the bile is taking the toxins out the back door. So if the bile is not flowing, a lot of those toxins will get reabsorbed. And then the system becomes very toxic, and that can make a person feel very nauseous. Also, if they can't break down dietary fats correctly, that can also make them feel nauseous, as those extra fats become toxic when they're not properly broken down. So if you feel really lousy when you eat a meal high in fat, that can be a strong indication that bile is not flowing very well. Another strong indication is acne or skin type issues, because when these toxins can't be taken out the back door through the bile, the body will try to push them out through the skin, and that can clog pores and create inflammation and acne in situations like that. If that's a problem for you, be sure to watch our Is Acne Caused by Digestive Issues video. That'll give you some more insights there. The next two markers we teach you how to do in our free 4-week digestion course. We teach you how to look at your pHs, and if your saliva pH is 6.5 or lower, that's a strong indication that bile is not flowing. And we also show you how to get these 10-parameter urinalysis dipsticks that you can pick up on like Amazon. They're not very expensive. But you can check those dipsticks, and if the markers bilirubin or urobilinogen show up on your urine dipstick, that's a strong sign that bile is not flowing correctly. Again, for that free course, we'll put the link down in the description so you can learn how to do those steps if you really need to look at more markers. For some people, some of these other markers are just screaming, and it's very obvious that the bile is not flowing correctly and that steps need to be taken. So let's look at these 5 steps that we can take to help thin the bile so that it can flow a little bit better. Now, step number 1, which happens to be the cheapest step, is to reduce the amount of grains and processed foods that you're consuming. You're like, why you gotta mess with what I'm eating? Why you gotta tell me what to do? Well, because one of the best things you can do to help improve the situation is remove the issues that might be causing the situation. Now, that doesn't mean you can never eat another processed food again. I'm just saying do what you can to reduce any burdens that might be making the situation worse. Now, let's go on to the next one, which happens to be the easiest step that you can take and also the most effective. If you're just going to reduce problematic foods, the process is going to be a little bit slower and it's going to take a little bit longer. But if we go to step number 2, we can use some supplements that will speed things up a whole lot. Now, we like to use a product called BeetFlow from Empirical Labs. Now, we're not the manufacturers of this product, and this is not a paid promotion of this product. It just happens to be the thing that we have seen works the best, and it's what we use with all of our clients. Now, BeetFlow works really well because it has a lot of concentrated beet greens juice. Now, beets don't really do a lot to thin the bile, so don't just eat a bunch of beets and think that you're going to fix the problem. And don't get a beetroot supplement, because beetroot doesn't really do anything to thin the bile. You need the concentrated beet greens juice. Now, you could also eat beet greens, but if you want it to be as effective as using a supplement like BeetFlow, you're going to have like a bucket of beet greens every day. You're going to look like a horse when you're eating. So that can be really problematic and a lot of work for people. So I find that people tend to just take the easier steps. So this is something that works very well, and it's probably the most effective step that we see people do. At the end of this video, I'll also tell you how to do what we call a BeetFlow flush, where we use this supplement to do a flush that can speed the whole process up a little bit. But let's look at step number 3 first, which might not be your favorite, but it's a coffee enema or coffee suppository. Hey, nobody said anything about going up the back door. I'm trying to get stuff out the back door. So people are not always super fond of sticking things up there, but a coffee enema or a coffee suppository is really effective at kind of dilating that biliary pathway and opening it up, so it makes it easier for the bile to move. So beet flow is really good at thinning the bile so it can move better, but a coffee suppository or a coffee enema is really good at dilating that pathway so that it can move a little easier. Now, if a coffee enema is a little too messy for you and a little too difficult to do, then the coffee suppositories are a lot easier, and people seem to like that idea a little bit better. We'll put a link down in the description where you can find some coffee suppositories that are really easy to use. Step number 4 is a supplement called choline. Now, choline is really great at thinning the bile so it can flow better, but only some people can use choline. You really don't want to use choline if it's not right for your body chemistry. If you do, it can cause some oxygen utilization issues and some energy production problems, and it's not going to be enjoyable for you. But in our free 4-week digestion course, we teach you how to run some self-tests to figure out if choline would really be very beneficial for you, or if it's something you need to avoid and stick with some of these other steps. Step number 5 is lowering estrogen levels if you're dealing with high estrogen issues, or maybe you're using a medication that really raises estrogen. So if you're on some type of birth control that raises estrogen or some other medication, you can talk to your doctor about looking for alternatives or reducing your dose so that you can bring that estrogen level down a little bit. But this can be a big problem because it's really hard to overpower really high estrogen levels, and a lot of the other steps may not be as effective if you keep your estrogen levels high. So this is a big deal and something you really want to address if this is a problem for you. And let's talk about a bonus step too, which is to increase the amount of dietary fat that you're consuming. Now, I wouldn't jump right into this one because if you're having issues from eating dietary fats, like you're nauseous or acne or some kind of problem like that, then increasing your dietary fats could make those worse. But as you increase your fats, the body is calling on bile to be dropped down more to help emulsify all these fats. So if you can take some of these other steps to thin the bile, like using beet flow or choline or removing some foods that are problematic, and you can get bile flowing a little bit better, then you can start to increase your fats and it might speed up the process a little bit. Now, for some people, they may have had their bile backed up for years or decades. And you're not going to take a couple supplements and fix everything in a 4-hour period that's been going wrong for 10 years. That's just not how it works when you're working to fix the actual underlying cause of a problem. So you might need to get a little bit more aggressive. So one step that we like to see people do is do what we call a beet flow flush using that beet flow supplement that we talked about. And the absolute most effective step we see people do is to do a beet flow flush on one day and then use a Zenaplex coffee suppository on the following day. And then do that combo about once a week until you see the bile improve. So that seems to really help out the people who have a really stubborn case and a hard time getting that bile to flow. And we teach you how to do all that stuff in the free 4-week digestion course. So go ahead and find that link in the description below. Sign up for that course so that you can walk through, and we'll help you figure out if this is a problem for you, as well as the steps that might be most appropriate for you and your unique bio-individuality. That's very important. But for now, why don't you check out our video on how to do a beet flow flush so you know how that works and you can have that step available to you. I can't wait to hear about your results.